And it's like, where's the line for you? Like, where would you say, like, all right, that's too much?
I don't know. Because it's surprisingly further and further every time I think about it.
Yeah.
Or it just disturbs me less and less.
Yeah. Because you can rationalize it, you know? It's like, what if you had someone that was influential? What if, like, you know, Columbia University approached a really good tattooer and said, I'm going to give you $500,000 a year to curate this program with marketing, you know, like, who's going to stop Columbia? You know, who's going to be like, oh, you can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, who cares?
Before we get started, hi, long time no see. This isn't a typical episode. This is more of a drawing room discussion kind of thing. My coworker Bill and I often talk about things in tattooing that we read about, and this is kind of just one of those discussions because a lot of the times I think, hey, we should record this and make a podcast. So that's exactly what we did. So there's a lot of maybe not fleshing out ideas or maybe switching topics when we weren't done getting to any points or changing our minds or contradicting ourselves or whatever. So I think it's fun. I hope you enjoy listening to it. And if it spawns any thoughts or ideas from you, feel free to leave them in the comments because I know you will. Because discussion is the name of the game. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. It's been a long time since I've seen you. You've probably forgotten, but I'm Andrew Stortz, and I make this show called Books Closed, where we talk about tat stuff. And I've been off for probably over a year at this point. I did some quarantine age Zoom call podcast, which just didn't have the same charm for me as getting to travel and talk to people in person. So I've been putting the show on ice for a bit, and it's still a bit on ice. But I wanted to share a conversation that's been happening at my own place of work. And I'm joined today by my partner in crime. We have
Bill Rocha.
Bill Rocha is here. We own Worship Tattoo in Portsmouth, New Hampshire together. And we've worked next to each other for many years at this point, and we talk a lot of shit. And so pretty much anything that comes up in either of our lives or our opinions about tattoo stuff, we talk about it every day. So I thought, let's talk about it again. And you might remember that Bill was on a number of episodes ago. We were talking about some goofball on the internet, and that was a good, fun time. But today we have a new topic and a new discussion to share.
Yeah, this is a discussion that's been going on for like, I think roughly 4 or 5 years now at this point. We've been going back and forth about this particular topic.
Yeah, so I think a good way to frame it, because we were talking about it a bit yesterday, over the last few years as I've been making this show, I've had a lot of people come to me with opportunities, and those opportunities I bring to Bill to discuss.
Probably not the best sounding board for you to be bouncing these ideas off of.
I think you are, because I'm a little bit... there's a few words you could use. I am optimistic, whereas you maybe are a little more cynical.
That's true. Yeah, that's accurate.
You've got almost a decade of wisdom on me, so I appreciate that wisdom. You lived a whole life before tattooing, exactly. Where I was just some dumb kid who started tattooing.
That's true. Yeah.
So people come to me. They want me to be part of their thing. Sometimes they want to get my opinion on things, and I never mind lending an opinion. But I've had people come to me for all sorts of things, including, I don't know, different conventions and conferences, and that's like pretty straight ahead stuff. But also internet radio shows. They want to use my podcast on their internet radio channel and pay me in exposure. Get the fuck out of here with that. Anyway. So how do we start this? We want to talk about tattooers and those tattooers who start auxiliary businesses to, from the cynical point of view, squeeze every ounce of milk from tattooing. Yeah. And from the optimistic point of view, build business and give themselves financial security outside of tattooing. And these are kind of where we differ on these opinions. And do you have any starting words that you want to go with? Because I don't know how to get into this.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to breach, I think, but I see a lot of tattooers right now that are trying to milk, for lack of better words, milk the industry, quote unquote. I know that that's not an appropriate word to use when it comes to tattooing.
Milk or industry?
Maybe a little bit of both. Yeah, milk the industry and fellow tattooers by creating these extraneous businesses that are periphery to tattooing, what tattooing actually is, you know? And I I feel like it's kind of encroaching on this like this sort of gray area where things that weren't appropriate or acceptable, a decade ago are now becoming like, oh well, yeah, that's okay, I guess. It's given a pass, and I feel like it's pushing into like dangerous territory in a lot of ways.
So do you see the parallel between those things becoming acceptable and other things that have changed in tattooing?
Yeah,
and
100%.
Is it all bad?
I don't think it's all bad, but I think a lot of it is like, I think with the advent of Instagram and the accessibility that tattooers have to a broader audience, it's becoming this like weird amalgamation of like digital and tactile stuff, like it's moving further and further away from the core essence of tattooing, what I see as tattooing.
Yeah. But I think a lot of parts of our life are moving towards these digital things that are different, and it just kind of follows suit with that.
100%, but where's the line? You know what I mean? Like,
why does there have to be a line?
I don't think there does have to be a line.
Okay, show over.
But I think that there is when it comes to, certain people feel a certain way about tattooing, and, they've cultivated this, what they want tattooing to be to them, and in the past it's been like, oh, you don't sell out, you know what I mean? The quote unquote old school tattooers that have like this sort of unwritten list of social norms that, they expect people to follow. But as tattooing is becoming more and more popular, there's more tattooers, and the whole essence of it is becoming more diffuse. And it's like leading into this territory that like, I know that, some aspects of it that aren't quite there yet, you might not agree with, as far as like business ideas,
Well, I think your opinions on this are interesting to me because I know that you're not like an old curmudgeon gatekeeper-y type, and I know that you're open to a lot of new stuff. But I feel like this is the one part of your idea of tattooing that is still rooted the deepest in opinions that we had when we started or before or stuff like that. And that's why I think it's interesting. Because to me, I feel like the whole thing's just kind of blown wide open. And again, maybe that's me just being optimistic and thinking that people are working with good intentions when obviously that's impossible for that to be the case when it comes to people making businesses and trying to do stuff. And people will say that they're starting whatever their new project is, it's for the betterment of tattooing, and we're going to improve the whole industry, and we're going to do all this. And I believe people can have that intention, but it's obviously the intention is always to make money.
Yeah, exactly. It's always for personal gain,
But is that a problem?
I don't know. I feel like we had this discussion yesterday when we were talking about the fact that we've been able to create our lives with tattooing, just tattooing. You know what I mean? There's no extraneous stuff going on, and it's like, when does that become not enough? You know what I mean? And it's like you got to start all this other stuff that's like borderline questionable. You know what I mean? And I feel like, and I hate to throw anyone under the bus, but I feel like the gate kind of got blown, like all the social norms were kind of thrown out the window with Everence, like that.
Shit.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you had all these like, these gatekeepers who, the respected tattooers that were involved in this thing, and it became this marketing, like this weird area where, tattooing might not have been comfortable going. And then it flopped.
So some context, if you're new here, Everence was a project that launched, I think, right before I started this podcast, because I remember I talked about it a little bit, but I made the decision I didn't want to talk about it too much because it was kind of all everybody was talking about at that point. But now it's been a few years. I think it's been 3 years or so at this point.
At least.
Maybe more. I don't know. But there was a project with a lot of very high-profile tattooers, like many of them, that were supporting this project that you would get this sample kit, you would take a DNA sample or a sample of whatever, dirt, sand from your favorite beach, saliva from a loved one, a pet. You'd send it into this company. They would encapsulate it into tattoo ink, and then you could get tattooed with it from these tattooers and from other tattooers. It was just tattoo ink, but it had the DNA encapsulated in it. So it was kind of like the modern startup version of putting someone's ashes into their tattoo ink.
Yeah.
And it was this whole thing, and everyone was outraged. And that really was kind of a line in the sand, turning point moment, I feel like, in tattooing. I agree, where things changed and people started to see things a little bit differently as far as what could be done and what was allowed.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting.
Yeah. It felt like and like I said, I respect, a lot of the tattooers that were involved in it, but it felt kind of like a money grab. It felt
of course
like
it was.
they were getting a payoff for it, and it was, in a way exploiting their audience and other tattooers that respected them, and you know what I mean?
But how did it exploit tattooing, in your opinion?
Because it was utilizing them as a conduit to reach out to other tattooers, you know what I mean? Like, other tattooers had to be on board for this to work. If someone brought in a vial of stuff and was like, hey, can you throw this in the tattoo ink? You know what I mean? I'd be like, fuck no. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what that is. But when you have other tattooers that are, are proponents for it and like, pushing it and saying like, oh, this is going to blow your mind, you have to at least pay attention to it. You know what I mean? Like, whether we agree with it or not, like, we were exposed to it multiple times. Like, it was on everyone's feed, Like, everyone that was involved in tattooing at that point knew what it was. So
do you believe that the tattooers involved with that, and again, they weren't in the labs creating this, they were enlisted to become the face of the company launch, at least at first. And I think that since then, I've seen a lot of them acknowledge that it probably wasn't the right way to do it, because those kinds of people were exposing it most to other tattooers, which wasn't the target audience. So maybe they weren't the right way to do it. And it feels like Everence had totally pivoted and kind of taken all those tattooers away from the front of it, and they were using athletes, veterans, people who would connect more with the audience, who would actually be buying Everence, which I think is smarter from a business perspective.
Yeah.
And hindsight's always 20/20. But anyway, do you believe that those tattooers who were the face of that launch, do you believe that they actually believed in the product or thought it was interesting enough to support it?
I think maybe a little bit of both. I don't think they had bad intentions by any means. You know what I mean?
So if it's something that they're comfortable with attaching their name to, and they believe in the product, they think it's a cool thing, and obviously from their point of view, they didn't see it as harmful, or they probably would not have done it. Let's say, because a lot of them also said they weren't paid, it was going to be a commission thing for the future, whatever. Let's just assume that they were paid a lump sum of money each to be attached to it, which I believe they should have been. If they weren't, that's kind of horse shit. But
yeah.
I mean, from a business point of view, they should have been paid. So let's assume, and I honestly don't know either way. I've never talked to anyone. I've never heard definitively. And it doesn't even matter, because this is more for discussion anyway. Let's say they believed in it, they thought it was cool, and they were paid. Is that okay?
I mean,
if it was just a cash grab?
I mean, I think it's okay as long as they're comfortable signing their name off on something like that. If they're willing to sign, if they're willing to put their integrity on the line for that, like, yeah, go ahead.
So do you remember what everybody's biggest complaints were?
I think it was the push, you know what I mean? It was the advertising. It was like
But it was like the implications on tattooing and what it could lead to. That's
Exactly.
always like the fear thing. Anytime anything changes, it's like, well, first it's this, then it will be this, this, and this.
Exactly.
So what, do you remember? I should have looked back on stuff. I feel like people thought that it was just going to give exposure to tattooing in a way that would open it to like legislation and reform and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I think that's always a worry. I think tattooers are always conscious of that. You saw the whole thing that happened in the UK and, Europe with tattoo pigments just recently, So I think tattooers are always concerned and worried about that. But I also think that it's opening up tattooing to be utilized as an advertising medium. You know what I mean? Like taking on these high profile tattooers for stuff that's like not necessarily like a tattoo product. This is like an extraneous thing. It's kind of outside of the realm of like, we don't need this to be tattooers. You know what I mean? If someone's pushing like a good ink or something, it's one thing, or a good pigment. It's like, okay, yeah, I can get on board with that. But when it's something that's extraneous and it's an expensive product on top of, the cost of the tattoo itself, that feels kind of like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think it matters.
I don't know. I do.
I can understand not supporting it. You're not going to buy it. You're not going to think it's cool. You're not going to defend it. Mm-hmm. But the cost of it doesn't matter, because the cost of anything is whatever somebody's willing to pay. Mm-hmm. And you can always look at it from like an anti-capitalist thing where you don't want to see people like, hitting someone for a lot of money. And it does kind of seem like you're, I don't know if I'd want to say that they're like targeting vulnerable people, because I think that term means something totally different in discussions, especially right now.
Yeah.
But trying to appeal to people who have like lost someone. It's like someone coming in for a memorial tattoo for their grandmother who just passed away, and you're like, $4,000, fucker, because you know they're going to get it, or like, you know, if you know they can pay it, they're going to pay it. So it's like, you could say from that angle, it's like targeting somebody who might be more willing to overpay for something, and that can feel kind of shitty. But I think for anything, we make the choices of things we buy, and I don't think that the price defines the validity or like the permission. And I don't know. And the fact that it's extraneous, same thing. Like there's a million things that are extraneous. So let's focus in now on probably the most common like side project that we've seen over the years are like tattooer books. Flash compilation books, themed flash books, that whole thing where people get involved or somebody has their own thing. What do you think about that?
I think there's way too many of them out there. You know what I mean? It's like every other week, it's like a rose book, a skull book, a space book, a whale book, a book about, you know what I mean? It's like...
But that's like selling art. That's not extraneous.
Yeah, that's true. But it's like, I feel like there's too many of them. Like I see a different one every other week. You know what I mean? And it's like, when does that kind of like get to be too much and you overload that? I think my concern with it is like these extraneous projects are kind of pushing the boundaries, and it's like, where does it get to be? Where does that, you know, that extra income other than just tattooing get to be too much? You know, and that pushes into, when thinking about this, it pushes into these territories where it's like, you know, well, you know, what's wrong with having like a tattoo school? You know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with having like a reality show about, a competitive reality show about tattooing? Like, I remember when Ink Master first came out, and it was like this big thing. It was like, people were, you know, it was before, it was like the MySpace age, but people were like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, you're making this reality show with Dave Navarro about a tattoo competition, but you had the guest judge list is like all accomplished tattooers, all influential tattooers. So it's like, you know, it became like, you know, the status quo accepted it. So it's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess a reality show's okay. And then another reality show sprung up, and then another one, you know what I mean? And now it's like, I mean, even with your interview with Freddie, not to like throw him under the bus again, but you know, when you were talking about the tattoo school that was coming up in Oakland, and he was like really against it, and you were like, well, what if someone offered you a shitload of money to do it? And he's like, I'd consider it. You know what I mean? And there's going to be a point where tattooing becomes so diffuse and like those social controls are out the window, where someone's going to do it and just be like, fuck it, I don't care. You know what I mean? Because we've found through, I think I've noticed it more through some of your podcasts, that you're able to curate like an audience on Instagram, you know, for good or bad. I mean, there's tattooers that have done sketchy shit and they've come back and just curated their audience, and it's like nothing ever happened. They just brush it under the rug, you know? So I think that it becomes like, you can curate your audience and then you can do whatever the fuck you want, you know? And I think that that's like a little bit of a dangerous zone for tattooing to be moving into.
I feel like we're already there.
I do too.
Like I don't fear that there's going to be anything that can happen that's going to ruin or change anything, because it's already happening.
Yeah, 100%. But people are still up in arms about it. You know what I mean? And it's like, where's the line for you? Like, where would you say like, all right, that's too much?
I don't know, because it's surprisingly further and further every time I think about it.
Yeah.
Or it just disturbs me less and less.
Yeah. Because you can rationalize it, you know? It's like with tattoo schools, it's like, you know, we've seen so many horrible shops take on like 5 apprentices, you know what I mean? Like every year. And it's like, you know, they're just churning out these tattooers who have, you know, like maybe like a bad set of morals, bad ethics, bad skill set, you know what I mean? And it's like, what if you had someone that was influential? What if like, you know, Columbia University approached a really good tattooer and said, I'm going to give you $500,000 a year to curate this program with marketing, you know, like who's going to stop Columbia? You know, who's going to be like, oh, you can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like you're cultivating a good set of tattooers with good skill sets, with good morals, with good ethics. You know what I mean? It's like, how does that, like, where's the balance? Where's the line? You know?
Right. I just feel like there's always going to be people that want to learn. And you can't expect that people are going to conform to this like old idea of an apprenticeship.
Exactly.
Because even apprenticeships aren't standardized. In a solid traditional, in air quotes, apprenticeship can be shit too. Just like a tattoo school is, as we know them, are most often shit because they're run by people who maybe aren't experienced enough in tattooing itself, but also as in being a teacher and running a program, and they just get in over their heads. Mm-hmm. And it's like a 2-week course or a 2-month course. And we all know that that's nowhere near enough time to really do much of anything.
Yeah, 100%.
You're still going to need somebody to accept that you're fully green and don't know anything. So you might as well just skip it and not give $3,000, $5,000 to some shitbag who's taking advantage of you.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, but it's the same, like you said, it's the same thing with apprenticeships. There's no standardized apprenticeship program.
So how should somebody learn?
That's the thing. I mean, I did a traditional apprenticeship, and I paid $10,000 for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, who's to say what the best way to learn is? And that's another thing.
But even your apprenticeship had weirdness to it, where
100%.
There were parts that weren't followed through on, and you were lucky that you were able to fall into a position where you were able to finish it out and stay on your path and everything. But for a lot of people, it ends there. You pay either some or all of the money that's being asked for the apprenticeship, and then they get screwed by somebody who doesn't follow through.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's the thing. It's like, what is the best way to learn, Like, I remember specifically one of the episodes you had on your podcast with Winston the Whale, and he was like, I went through a tattoo school, you know what I mean? Because he just was eager to learn. He was an art kid, and he was eager to learn how to tattoo. And it's like, apprenticeships aren't always accessible, depending on your geographic location, depending on your relationship with the tattooer, you know what I mean? Like, so he learned through this tattoo school, and now he's got like whatever his following is, it's huge, Mm-hmm. And it's like, who's to say, like, who's going to approach him and be like, oh, you went through, tattoo school, like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, you're not allowed to be part of this thing that is tattooing,
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It's like,
right. So coming from that opinion, I know that ever saying like, yeah, tattoo schools could be a good idea is like hard to say for anybody.
Yeah.
And even trying to be as open looking at it as I have over the last couple of years, I still can't really say that either, because we've never seen a version of it that has worked.
Exactly.
And it would take the right people, but I don't know, because most tattooers, even if they're great, they're not necessarily teachers. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think to like, what are the things classically that people are told when they're discouraged by some tattooer to not learn? Oh, it's too hard. Oh, it's not for you, or all these things. Mm-hmm. But it's like, who is allowed to learn to tattoo?
That's the thing. There's with the no standardization, there's no vetting process. You know what I mean? With tattooers. I mean, we brought up in discussion a couple weeks ago that there was programs in prisons now that teach tattooing. You know what I mean? As a trade. And it's like,
I should have pulled that article up. It was somewhere in the Midwest or something. There was a job posting about somebody running a program in a prison to teach tattooing.
Yeah, exactly. So what does some young kid do? Like, oh, here's a program I can get into. I'll just, do some criminal mischief and like learn to tattoo, I'll do a 3-year stint, and you know what I mean?
That might be the most definite route to an apprenticeship.
That's very effective. So
like maybe the only one.
Yeah. If you're trying to get an apprenticeship, like,
steal a car.
Just get arrested in the Midwest somewhere.
Just don't hurt anybody.
Yeah. Just,
right?
Small misdemeanors.
Yeah. So to bring it back to probably where this discussion with us began this past week was last week I was part of a Zoom call group. I don't know how to describe it. It's a new project that Russ Abbott, who's been on the show in the past, he's starting. And I don't know if he's really posted about it publicly, so I'm not going to say too many specific things.
Okay.
But anyway, he had texted me and asked me if I would check it out. And they did a presentation pitching this new project. And this project is something that tattooers are able to be a part of through a membership, whatever. I'm sure a lot of people maybe know about this, or maybe he has posted about. I don't know. I'm just trying to play it cool if it's a secret. So there's this project. Mm-hmm. And then I talked to you about it. Mm-hmm. I told you what it was about. And I think that's what sparked this whole thing, because Also, in the recent past, Russ had done the whole like survey of tattooers. I think mostly in the U.S. about what their hourly rate is, and compiled all this data, and did kind of a presentation on that at a conference somewhere, I believe. But also just like sent it out, and I think that was cool information and a cool thing to do, especially for people who maybe don't have peers in their area to discuss that sort of stuff with. And the whole idea was more or less to encourage people to raise their hourly rates, to mimic inflation and all that stuff, things that we don't always necessarily do in the smartest way. Anyway.
Or in a unified way at any rate.
Yeah. So you had the feeling that it seemed like coming from the Tattoo Smart company and from Russ, that there's a lot of things happening at all times.
Yeah, for sure. There's, and I admire Russ's tenacity and like trying to, figure out certain avenues to like, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say help the tattoo community, but I think a lot of the stuff that he does is like positive, but a lot of the stuff is like, it just seems like kind of half baked in a way, like this new project, I definitely we had some differing opinions on, and not to say that it won't work, but I don't know.
I just feel like there is an audience for all of the stuff that I've seen him develop and try and also do successfully. And that it feels, I don't know, I feel like you're coming from a cynical place that I feel like maybe I'm looking at it from a bigger picture and you're zoomed in on it more, thinking about how your own role with interacting with these things might be. And where even though if there's something that I'm not personally going to buy or use or participate in, I can see the purpose of it. As kind of similar, or interesting punctuation to the conversation was that I guess yesterday, Russ posted that he was trying to finish up ongoing tattoo projects because he's considering retiring from tattooing. And so I think that both clicked something in our heads as we both saw it separately. And I think this is a bigger discussion because we don't really think about retirement as tattooers.
Yeah, 100%.
And I mean, Russ is a unique person in that he has done way more things and tried a lot and had more ideas and development and all sorts of stuff than most tattooers do. So it's easier to see someone like him developing these things, trying to build financial stability outside of tattooing itself. And I don't see any problem with any of it. Because if he comes up with an idea and puts a bunch of work into it and nobody likes it or sees it as valuable and nobody buys it or whatever, then no harm, no foul. He tried and it doesn't hurt anything.
No, I don't think it does, but I think there's this sense that like it's pushing the boundaries of like what's acceptable, according to these like random social norms that we have or social controls that tattooing has, Which I don't feel like you believe in generally, again. No, but I feel like each of us individually has a concept of what tattooing is to us, you know what I mean? And for me, like, Instagram is kind of like, for me, essentially it's an online portfolio, you know what I mean? It's like a way to showcase my work and generate clientele. To be tattooed. It's not a way for me to like, reach millions of people to sell a product that I have, So it's different for each of us individually, And again, it comes back to curating our pages, curating our careers, curating our, the feel of the shop, everything. It's like we create tattooing in our own personal world, and seeing the boundaries being pushed and seeing it expand and seeing like, over the past, we've both been tattooing for about the same amount of time. We've seen tons of changes in tattooing, and it's like, when does it start getting away from that core, like of what tattooing is?
I think the core to whoever you ask what the core is, it's going to be whatever it was when they started.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there is like one tangible core. I think we all have our own core. So it's hard to apply your core to somebody who started tattooing 3 years ago.
Yeah. But again, I think it comes back to like a personal question. Like, if you have this like sort of a cultivated perception of tattooing, when does that get to be like, when are you just like, that's too much? You know what I mean? And I think that we each individually need to ask ourselves that question. Like, when is it just like, all right, you know, this is like way out of my realm of understanding. And it's like way, you know, in left field of tattooing, it's like way out there, you know? But again, tattooing is becoming so big and so diffuse, and so there's so many tattooers that are starting every day, you know, that are just like young and hungry, and like they don't have the same background that you or I have, or the same background that, like, you know, guys that are, you know, still out there doing it. Like, look at Dana Brunson. He's like still out there doing it. You know what I mean? And he still has this like this core, like, you know, sort of set of rules that he like adheres to, you know?
Right. Yeah, his core.
Yeah, exactly. His perception, his like cultivated concept of what tattooing is, you know. George, who we worked with, has the same thing, you know what I mean? He's seen tattooing evolve through decades, you know? And it's like, what point does it get to where it's like, okay, you know, that's too much?
Well, that's an interesting avenue to go down, as we're on a tattoo podcast that's available to everybody, that has like shown a lot of light on parts of discussion that maybe haven't been available to the general public and new tattooers and younger people who are aspiring. And maybe that's part of why I feel like I can't be overly critical, because I've contributed to a lot of openness. But I think it's good and it's valuable.
I think opening up these discussions is good because it's, you know, it's in the realm of tattooing, like the discussions that tattooers have about tattooing aren't necessarily like public knowledge, you know what I mean? Like, and everyone has a differing opinion. Like, you know, when I get tattooed by certain people, like, you know, you have discussions with them, and, you know, you talk about tattooing and the state of tattooing and where it's at and what's happening in the world of tattoo. And it's always interesting to me. Those are some of the best discussions that I've had, you know, with you, you know, and getting tattooed by various other people. You know, it's always an interesting thing to have, you know, get someone else's take on, you know, what's going on, you know, in our world.
Yeah. So one other auxiliary thing that I've noticed a little bit of a trend in, a micro trend, I'd say, a mini little micro trend, and I'll get your opinion on this. If you've seen like Austin Maples, who's been on the show, and a couple people in his circle seem to be doing like car raffles, motorcycle raffles, using their platform they built through tattooing to do these raffles. How do you feel about that?
I think that's totally separate from tattooing. You know what I mean?
But it's using their platform they built from tattooing. The same way that if you made a book, it would be using the platform you've built and the visibility that you've built as a tattooer. Because most of us aren't like influencers in the way that like our separate life is getting us visible. It's like our work, our tattoos are what's putting us in in people's eyes.
So I know guys that, you know, buy and sell motorcycles all the time, and technically the raffles that they're doing is gambling. So it's like, you know, a lot of the people that I know don't do it because they're like, this is like way too weird. You know, it brings you into like this weird tax area. But I think, you know, having a personal vehicle, if they were doing it like commercially and like doing it like all the time, you know, that's one thing. But if you have like this old car that you're like trying to sell and you want to like, you know, make the best money you can on it, you know, I think that's fine. You know, I don't have any qualms with that. Like, I don't think it's a big deal.
It's because you're a motorcycle guy.
What's that?
You're a motorcycle guy.
Yeah.
So you're making concessions for your own kind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If I can win a cool bike, you know, like, I'm on board.
I mean, for the record, I don't really have a problem with it either. I think it's cool. And somebody gets to win a car for $100 or whatever the tickets cost.
Yeah.
Legalities aside, I don't know the legal side of it. I guess that makes... I know that there are...
the spot on a bunch of people that I know.
Yeah, there are like raffle rules from Instagram that you can get in trouble just from the platform for their own rules, but I don't know. Yeah.
You have to check your local tax code. I don't know. Talk to your accountant.
Yeah. Don't start a raffle until you know a little bit more about it. I think your opinion on the book thing is interesting because it's all coming from a fragmented or segmented market. So if the problem is that there's too many, that's no one person's fault.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, you know, it's the same thing with trends anywhere. You know, one person sees it and then they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And then they do it and then they do it. And then, you know what I mean? It's like this repeating pattern. And it's, you know, I don't have any like personal issues with it, but I just feel like there's a lot of them out there, you know? It's like...
Sounds like you're pissed.
It's maybe a little bit.
What about selling prints? There's a lot of prints out there.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it.
Because you're making like one piece of art and you're selling it as an individual and you know what I mean?
That's a book.
What's that?
That's a book. It's just pages of prints.
It's just one page of a book?
Well, I mean, yeah, you could look, it's the same thing. You're making a reproduction of a thing.
One page book that I'm selling you rolled up into a tube. There you go.
I mean, you buy books, you have a lot of books, and I know that you reference them like I do, and they're useful.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, I don't know.
I don't think too much books ain't never a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I don't think. Know. I feel like I'm just seeing a lot of them.
I do think the quality in many of them has been less than they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I used to buy every book.
Yeah, same.
And they were all great.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't wait to look through them. And then it got to a point where I was still buying pretty much everything that I saw, and they were disappointing.
Yeah, the quality goes downhill. I think, again, as, you know, more and more come out, it's like, you know.
That might just be more of a statement on the ease of self-publishing a book.
Could be.
That it's more attainable for anyone to slap together a collection of something. But again, like with any product, people can buy it or not, and it's your decision to do it.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess if there's a demand for it, if there's so many of them, there's got to be people that are buying them, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so I guess to circle the wagons, my opinion lies in that when it comes to developing products and ideas and things within tattooing, I think it's good. I think it's almost always good.
Yeah, but again, like, I feel like you skirted around the issue. You never really answered the question of like, where's the line for you? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one?
I guess it's always a case by case because we're having a very general discussion about potentially many different types of things.
Why don't you just answer the question, Andrew?
Well, I'm trying to get there. So one example, and this is another thing we've been discussing lately. We saw in Denver, there is a tattooer who is offering a masterclass. I want to cut in here with a quick editor's note. This is Andrew from the future, and this topic that we are about to talk about. Since filming this, I have read a bit more about it, and there is a lot more that could be discussed specifically that we didn't know at the time. So take this as a very general and maybe not fully informed discussion about this matter. Thanks. And we know about it because there are tattooers that come from a more traditional background who are not happy about it naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the same situation we see. To put it very plainly, there's a tattoo school that pops up, all the tattooers get pissed, and then whatever happens, they influence it to stop or change or not. And so the problem with this one that has been identified is that this woman has only been tattooing for 3 years, and she's offering what's called a master class, and that's making people not so happy about it, which to me makes sense. And then she responded and said, okay, I used the word master, and I understand that's like a marketing thing. But I do feel that somebody with 3 years of experience probably shouldn't be teaching a class, and certainly not teaching a class for the amount of money. So again, I guess this is my first time saying that maybe that's too much. And not because she shouldn't make a bunch of money, because she is, regardless of how good or bad anyone thinks she is putting work into developing this thing, hopefully. And she is putting a lot of effort and time into it. And I think that people should be compensated for their effort and time. And if somebody decides that they like her work and they like her approach and they like her attitude and they like her, that they want to pay to learn, how to get started from her. So again, I'm kind of like internally struggling with it because on a surface level, I think it's probably not worth the money. If we're being honest. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what she knows. I'm pretty sure she went to art school, so she has a foundation in art.
And the type of tattooing that she's doing, like thinking about this last night before, we talked about having this discussion today, and it's like for the tattooers that are arguing against it, that are like vehemently against it. Like we know some of them that are like, pissed. But the question in my head is like, do you want to be doing the type of tattoos that she's doing?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or
is it infringing on your...
Yeah, is it gonna mess your thing up? Or is it gonna open the gateway for these people that are getting these small decorative ornamental tattoos? Like, all of a sudden they want to get a, they decide they want to do a back piece, and they're like, well, where can I go for that? Like, I really enjoy having this small tattoo, and now I want to get a big one. I'm going to go to this person who I've seen their portfolio and I really like them, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You could look at all these small, minimal tattoos as the perfect accessible gateway for people to start getting tattooed.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like the TV shows were a gateway for people to be introduced and maybe feel a little more comfortable walking into a tattoo shop. Yeah,
it's a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? And and again, like in thinking about this last night, it's like there's no, for this woman that's creating this masterclass, there's no law against her doing this.
Right.
And
she does have skills, whether we think that it's enough or not. She has experience in tattooing. She has done many tattoos.
Yeah.
And if she wants to share her knowledge with people for money, then that's perfectly her prerogative.
Yeah. And the type of tattooing she's doing, it's like she's capable, you know what I mean? And that's what she's teaching to other people, these minimalist tattoos. Mm-hmm. And it's like, again, there's no law against it. She's cultivated her page. There's clearly interest in it. Like if you look at some of the comments and, on her posts, it's like, there's tons of interest in it. Mm-hmm. She has like a potentially full roster of people to teach this to.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and those people are not interested in what those who are opposed to her specifically, what they think should be the proper apprenticeship track. The people who are signing up with her would never want that. They're actually probably pretty deliberately looking for the opposite of that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. And that's where, when you open your mind to the fact that there are like so many different pockets of tattooing that people are aspiring towards, it's hard to really apply your own personal core of ethics to almost anything in a way that means anything to anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, as far as I see, the gateway is, the dam's been breached, you know what I mean? And it's like this flood of things, and it's getting harder and harder to control just through those sort of social controls that tattooing has exhibited or, has like pushed for years, you know what I mean? Because that's the only way that tattooing has been able to rein stuff in and essentially gatekeep in a lot of ways, mm-hmm. Or vet if you want to call it that. But now it's like the floodgates are wide open. Right.
And that's why I see, like, when Russ Abbott did the hourly rate data compilation and then sent it to everybody for no cost, for no anything. There were no advertisements on it. He was just, I think, simply providing useful information to people. Mm-hmm. And initially, there were comments on it where people were like, oh, just stop. Like, oh, stop treating it like such a business. Like, oh, this isn't what it's about. And I think it is what it's about, because you can't have it both ways. If you're worried about, if coming from like a scarcity mentality, that too many people learning or too much accessibility to education and starting and tattoo schools and all that stuff, if it's going to cause there to be, one, too many tattooers, two, cheapen the craft, then something like a free packet of information about what you should be charging, that's like a positive change to combat something that is happening whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And I think stuff like that is good, and people should be, if they actually do want to do change and to make things better, then something like that I think is one of the more valuable things I've seen in a while. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't for purchase, it was just given to whoever added their information to the thing, filled out the survey. And so, I mean, it always comes back to scarcity mentality, I think. And you can say that it's more than that, and many people do, and I believe that they feel that, but I always just think that every negative reaction to anything new is out of fear and willingness, or like lack of willingness to change, but also just worrying that your thing isn't going to be the thing anymore. That's always the case. Don't you feel like what you always thought was cool isn't the cool thing now?
Yeah, I'm old, man. Like,
but it'd be even specific. Well, I mean, yeah, like everything in life, but like, but like tattoo stuff.
Yeah.
Like even 5 years ago, it felt like we knew what was cool. We knew what was up.
Yeah, but I think every generation of tattooer feels that way. You mm-hmm. know, it's like every generation's like, oh man, the newer generation, like, oh, you missed out, man. Like, it was great back,
Yeah.
whenever we started.
Right, but that's like to excuse themselves from learning the new thing, which is hard.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to, and maybe you're not as into it as the old thing.
Yeah. I always think about that with like, people that are like, oh, loyal to the coil. And it's like, but why? You don't have to fall into this dogma of, like stubbornness where you're like unwilling to try new things or unwilling to like do something like differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Once you start wearing it as an identity, it shows that you have like some sort of defensiveness, weird thing about it.
Yeah.
You can just not like new machines and use your old coil machines that you've always used, and that's great.
Yeah.
But once you're like wearing a t-shirt that you're like, I'm that person.
Yeah, you're stuck in it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with iPads, you're drawing on an iPad or, using a wand machine or using cartridges or, you know what I mean? Any new advancement in technology, it's like,
When was the last time you drew a tattoo on paper?
Oh man, I can't even remember.
When was the last time you used a coil machine?
It's been a long time. I've used rotaries for a long time anyways. Yeah, it's been, I used coils to line prior to that. So before I started using a wand, I used coil machines to line, but my shaders were all rotaries.
Right.
I don't know. For me, it works.
Okay. Let's wrap it up.
All right.
Shop's opening. We're dragging everyone's schedule behind here today. I don't know if we answered any questions.
I don't think we did. No. It's like our usual discussion just goes around in circles.
Yeah. And it always ends with, you want to get lunch?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I hope you liked it. I'll see you sometime. I am doing a live podcast with Julie Moon and one other person that I'm not sure of yet, down in Massachusetts at a museum kind of setting. I'll have more information on it soon, but it'll be a cool thing. And if you can't make it, then it will be streamed right where you're listening to this, so you'll get to check it out. I'll be back with more stuff eventually or not. Okay, thank you.